all the different things, the networking equipment that makes our NOC work. And how can we get away from that? What are ways that we can do, things that we can do to not have to do that? Some people use Amazon. Like you saw up here earlier, S2, EC3. I don't know if you all use rack space. There's a lot of different options out there for shared storage, shared compute that we can go to. But what can we do with school districts? TechServe gives us the ability to do that, and that's one of the reasons that we've teamed up with them, is that it's an ISD. They are familiar with ISDs, how they work, including E-rate, different funding sources, and it's school data. A lot of IT directors and superintendents really have a problem with Amazon storing and keeping information that could be secured to a school. You know, I want my data to be under my control. And that's what we've helped solve with this too, is that it's a hybrid solution that we're going to be offering with TechServe, where you have the data actually on site, because it's fairly difficult to have compute and data that are not together. You know, there's too much latency typically if I split those out. So we can help provide compute and storage that are local to your site, but also provide backup or disaster recovery and both offsite. So if you have problems, if there's a communication issue, if you lose power completely, then you can continue to run. So 20 different options. There's, you know, different cooks in the kitchen. There's 20 different ways to skin that cat. But if, with VMware, with all the solutions that we have in place, it's fairly easy to say, okay, we need to bring up your compute at a new location because we have replicas of it. And then in the future, as we start migrating away from that local compute, that's very easily transferable. Right now with Amazon, sure, if we got storage, we could use some storage, but it would be difficult to actually run compute against it. If we needed to run a server against storage that existed on the cloud at Amazon, it would probably not work. There has to be other ways for us to do that. And that's what we're working with TechServe to do. This is a good example on this slide of some of the things that we've seen change over the past few years. And one of them is this. This slide shows what it took when we first started doing this, what it took to run a couple hundred, 125 it says here, this is probably a couple years old. And it's kind of dark in this room, but I think you can probably see it good. It took quite a bit of space, quite a bit of money to make something like this happen, to run a desktop in a virtual environment. And what we've done is kind of just reduce that. We have very high-speed servers that run many desktops inside of a 1U chassis. And it's fairly simple to use once everything's set up. I don't think I can actually see, but we have our traditional storage solution and our traditional compute, and we can combine those into one solution. Dave can explain some of the technical terms and everything else, but they use something called persona management, I think it is, where we don't have to actually have the computers on each of these machines. There's clones that replicate out to them, and then any data that needs to follow you can be stored somewhere else. So even if we lose one of these servers, it's not that big a deal. It's distributed and can be rebalanced, I think they call it, across all of them. And then all the data gets transferred from some other location up to these machines where it can be cached. It's a fairly, once you understand it, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Why didn't we do that before? Oh, I forgot to talk a little more here. And something that makes sense when you're talking about this model too is our TCO. Everybody here talks about TCO, and we use that term a lot in a lot of different things that we use, but our total cost of ownership, or TCO, in the NOC is really hard to follow sometimes, especially with school districts. because we might have different funding sources from different things. You know, I have this particular thing that has a funding source, and this item might be a completely different funding source, including electricity. A lot of ISDs have different funding sources for just different things in the NOC. So it's hard to get a real TCO, but we have it. And for what I've done or what history has shown us in all the ISDs that we've worked in, is that the TCO is my maintenance on the equipment, the manpower that it takes to run all of this. You know, what kind of engineer am I going to have in place to do these kind of things? The more complex we get with them, the more expensive the engineers are. A lot of us are having a hard time, or a lot of ISDs are having a hard time keeping, you know, $70,000 a year engineers in place to run a storage device or more. You know, it's not uncommon for that to happen. And shared storage or shared cloud, shared compute, somebody to help manage that really makes sense, especially when you add up all these different things. You add up all the complexity that you have to deal with if you don't do something like this. It can get very expensive. You can switch. So we're all familiar with Moore's Law, and we know that quickly we're going to be running into a situation where whatever we have is no longer going to be current, especially in technology. It just moves too fast. We move so quickly now. And honestly, how many times have they said, oh, Moore's Law is going to be broken, it's going to be extended? How many times have we heard that? How many times have we heard that it's not going to be 2 years anymore? It's not going to be this X amount of time. It's going to be extended to 3 or 4, but that hasn't happened yet. I think I did a little research on this when I saw it on the slide, and somebody said just a few days ago, or a few weeks ago, I'm sorry, that, yeah, 2013, we're going to have a transistor, what are we at, 25 nanometers now? Does anybody know? Our actual size of what the transistors are on the chips. And they said by 2013, we're not going to be able to keep up with Moore's Law. Then the next guy saying, now it's going to be 2020, that we were able to figure out how to shrink the dies and how to do these things, and now we're looking at 2020. So it's the same thing that we see all the time, that we're going to have, even if it doesn't keep at 2 years, we're going to have this progression where the technology that we have in a very short amount of time is going to be old technology. How many districts here, or that can hear me, I guess we don't have any hands that I can see online, but how many people have spent a lot of money on a device, ended up 4 years, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years down the road, and it was useless? I mean, practically useless. I mean, how many times do we run into that? Shared storage helps us with that a little bit. It says you're going to be responsible, whoever that is that's doing it, you're responsible for keeping that up to date. That's your responsibility. My responsibility is going to be to use it and to tell you how much I need to get done. Whatever form that is, it can be quite a few different things.
About this, because it's interesting. Are y'all looking at
Eddie's asking a question. I don't know if y'all can hear him.
are y'all looking at the shit? So you're looking at stuff in our center, stuff in y'all's center for backup. Sure. But y'all own it all, and we pay y'all.
Why don't we talk?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more. If y'all have some, yeah. We'll talk a little bit more. There's going to be Q&A, and then I think all of our contact information is going to be online. So when we're finished with this, if you need to call, I think all of our phone numbers should be here. Is that right, Frank? Or?
Yeah, I mean, but be my guest to be flexible if you want to use your time that way. But let's. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'll go through this, Eddie, and then we'll cover that some more if I don't answer it by the time we're finished. So this slide, this is we see some traditional technology, some fairly old technology in here also. We see some large racks. We see the things that we're doing right now, and how are we going to move this? How are we going to transform into a shared environment? Huawei, one of the reasons that we're really interested in working with Huawei, and I have to tell another story before I go into that. Huawei was our customer first. they came to us, oh gosh, I don't know, what was it, 6, 8, 12 months ago. They came to us and needed help with, at the, not the enterprise side, but the carrier side, is that right? So the NOC, okay. The carrier NOC came to us and they needed some help with some problems they were having. And I'll leave it at that. They needed to be able to do some things. So we helped them do that. And I remember Dave coming to me, was like, how do you even say that? I don't even know how to, because he showed me the name. I was like, well, I don't know. Where are they from? I've never heard of it. I thought it was a Hawaiian company or something. But it turns out they had some very similar things to what we were doing. They had some similar concepts too, and they want to help people. And the relationship has been, it's been amazing, because once you start talking to Jane, you spend some time with her, and Rob, I don't know, I guess Rob isn't here, they really care, and it's refreshing. I've seen a lot of different people, a lot of different vendors, and they lose sight easily. And Huawei is one of those companies that really care about what we're trying to do. And that's what I always look for. That's what we've looked for years. You know, we've been in this for 12 plus years. And you always look for people that care as much as you do about kids and about districts. Our company has, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 different districts that we work for at all different levels. Some of our districts, we're the IT department. So some of our districts we visit once a month. We have a lot of different levels that we work with districts, but talking to Huawei, it's refreshing to say, hey, yeah, I care. What do you want to do? What are you looking for? How can we save you money? How can we get more money into the classroom? How can we quit spending as much here? How can we make this more cost effective over here so you can put money into the classroom? So you can spend money on iPads, so you can spend it on tablets, spend it on projectors, smart boards, whatever we need in the classroom. It's really fun talking to them and saying, here's how we can do that. Here's the things that we can do, including one of these images is a Huawei switch that we've been using in our solutions, because we, as part of our solution, we offer a 10G base T, and that's just 10 gig interfaces that are built into the servers. And instead of having to have a fiber module or an SFP or something to plug into a very expensive 10 gig switch, just like the traditional switch that was 1 gig, they have a 10 gig RJ45 switch that we use that's very easy. I mean, the guys, the engineers, and Dave can tell you more, but the engineers got this thing. It's a cloud engine, I think, 6850 cloud engine. They got it, and they're like, well, that was easy. It took about 5 minutes is what they said. They plugged it in. They did a couple command lines. Here you go. And there we go. We were 10 gig ether channel. I don't know. I guess that's not the Huawei name for group. I don't know what they call it. Or group together, connected up to another switch at 10 gig through a fiber interconnect, and you can plug 48 of these things in there. And it was cost effective. The cost per port that we looked at on everything else that we were using, and I'll try not to mention names, but just other vendors, it could get expensive in a hurry. And it just made sense. It's like, well, this is great. And we found this out, I think, working with the NOC. They actually introduced it to us. We started getting more and more involved, including their storage solutions, which we're pretty aggressive. We don't like to mess with spinning disk a lot. We do all of our servers and our storage runs on solid-state drive, just because if you need a spinning disk, we really feel that you can go down to Fry's and buy a spinning disk, and it's going to be as reliable as it would of something that you would get from somebody else. But Huawei actually offers that too, and they're fairly cost effective. But for us, our future is solid state. It's more reliable, faster. All the problems that we've had in the past with storage are typically related to I/O, input and output operations. And we solved a lot of our issues with I/O, including our VDI. You know, it's nice to be able to log on to a VDI And you remember that when you first got your computer and you logged on and it just instantly came up? Or how about that first time that you saw Word run in cache mode, where you would click on Word? I don't know if you guys remember, but Word used to take maybe a few minutes to load, or Outlook or something. And that first time that you saw a fast machine, you clicked on it and it instantly came up. You're like, holy cow, this is awesome. That's what SSDs, or solid state drives, helps us do in our virtual environments, is that kind of application performance that you're not going to see most anywhere else. You just won't see the kind of desktop and application performance that you would with your traditional solution that's off a spinning disk. And I could go on and on, including not only are we running 10 gig with these, but I have in my notes here that we're doing 40 gig interfaces off of these. We had somebody came to us the other day. We help with NOx center moves. And they came to us and they said in the future you can use, I think it's 8 cables or 8 strands of fiber that it takes to plug into 40 gig interfaces. And they said we have in the future that you can use these 40 gig cables. And we had to say, well, this is the future. The future is now. We need those now. And he said, well, are you sure nobody's really doing this? Well, yes, we would like to see that option, because we have that capability right now with these switches, including 100 gig in the future. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, or I guess I can say that. Yeah, I can say that. 100 gig with the Huawei switches in the future, that they have the large format 12,000 series switches that we can use to plug into these cloud engine switches to provide access to high-speed servers, no matter what they are. So one of the things that we're really excited about with shared storage and compute, or shared cloud, is breaking this cycle of having to spend money, large amounts of money, every X number of years. And you can call, it's different for everybody. It depends on where you're at in the cycle. You have a cycle of I have to replace or upgrade my storage, my SAN, and everything that's connected to it. I have fiber channel, 4 gig, 8 gig, 16 gig, wherever I'm at in that cycle. I have my network upgrade that I'm at 100 megs to the desktop. I was going to say 100 gig. Oops. Oh, that's all right. I think I'm done with those anyway. So I have my network upgrades, and we've all been through this. We've had to pull out our switches out of the NOC and replace it with these new ones that have these cool new features, and they have this larger backplane. Working with Huawei, it's been fairly refreshing to be able to walk into somewhere and go, well, what's your backplane on the switch that you have? It's X gigabytes per second. And to be able to look at them and go, really, you're still in the gigs? You're still talking about gigabit per second on these backplanes. The amount of data that we're moving around in NOx now really requires in the terabit per second backplanes, and being able to, even small locations. We walk into a 380 EA school district, and we have terabit capabilities that we can move data around. And when you need a good user experience or end-user experience, you need that, and it's cost-effective. That's what's really cool. So you're able to do these things cost-effectively, and it's exciting to go into a school district and say, yeah, let's work together. Let's show you Huawei can help do this too. It's fun. So I think that's the end of. I'll quit talking. Dave's looking for me. If you guys have any questions, I think we're going to have a Q&A. And then if our contact information isn't online, or if it's not available after this, you can just email us or email whoever is on the list here, and I'll make sure they have all our information. But I'm going to turn it over to Dave Harmon. He's the president of HV Connections, and he's the guy with the lab coat running around making sure all this stuff works.
really knows what he's talking about technically.
Yeah, so I'm Dave Harmon, as he said. So, you know, you hear a lot of passion on the ISD market for our company, and really 90% of our business is in the school districts. Like you said, I'm passionate about it because I have 5 kids from 12 to 25. So, you know, my 12-year-old, well, he's not little, he's about as big as me. I tell his coach that he needs to wear 401k on his back because that's my 401k. But anyway, we are passionate about this technology. Joe covered quite a bit. Just really to say, as a technologist, I've been in the technology engineering since 1990, some of my first jobs. And to be a technologist and working in this realm and seeing how, talking about terabit transmissions on Ethernet protocols, it's really amazing to see where the transition has went from, you see the 100 gig to 1 gig, and now we're talking about top rack switches that's just 10 gig native, right? And when we built this technology, we were really waiting for the market to catch up and technology to catch up what we were able to push on our servers. And then coming across Huawei and what they can do on their switching infrastructure, being a technologist, you try to be somewhat vendor agnostic and try to work with those vendors that can provide the solutions. And one of the things that we saw very quickly when we came across Huawei is like, that is it. We need that. We can push that. We can do these things. So it's been really, you know, as an engineer, it's been really neat and cool to see this stuff. And what's really, as Joe said, when we go into a 2A school and we can deliver them 10 gigabit Ethernet natively and push that out in a 2A, where traditionally that was really for the, you know, I say some of the larger school districts that had the funding, right? Now you're seeing these 2A schools like, hey, I've got that too. Look at me. I may have 600 students, but I've got 10 gig. So it's really neat, and then to coincide that with our virtualization initiatives that we have, and that we're working with Huawei, it's been really neat, and it's really neat seeing the students adapt to it. And you know, my kids are my guinea pigs as well. So if they like it, I know it's cool. So if they don't understand it, so be it. So some of the things that we do, and really what aligns with Huawei and their initiatives, and we saw that very quickly, is when we engineer our solutions, we have this philosophy with all of our engineers, and it has to pass this acid test. It's got to be MSRP. All of our solutions have to be manageable, scalable, reproducible, and predictable. If we can't execute on that, we're not going to be in business, because we are a startup, but we're a startup on the somewhat bleeding edge. So when we develop these solutions, that is our criteria. We don't have 140,000. We have some, right? We're definitely right there. But if we can do our engineering philosophy like that, it really pays off for our end users as well. Because so many times school districts are so caught up into vendor marketing and vendor hype, and us trying to go in and say, hey, we want to solve a problem. Your virtual desktop is not tied to a particular, let's say, vendor. The virtual desktop is a tool that our schools can use to teach with, right? Let's make it where you're focused on what you can do with a desktop as a service. Let's focus on what you can do with your Skyward applications that run faster. Let's focus what you can do with your ERP, your iStations, your whatever, right? Let's get away from, you know, the vendor hype, and let's solve that problem. And a lot of what we've done is had to develop our own solutions, or search out other companies outside the scope and say, hey, can you deliver this and deliver it cost effectively and meet our MSRP? Because really what we do is that feeds into everything else. The total cost of ownership, as Joe talked about, we never really believed when we started, and I've been working in desktop virtualization since back when terminal services were around, since 2006. And it never added up. The storage, the IOPS, what you had to have from an engineering perspective to make it run efficiently, you could do it, but you're going to spend $1,500 to $2,000 per desktop, and it just didn't make sense. School districts can't do that. Oil and gas companies can do it all day, right? School districts can't. So really focusing on bringing the value to a desktop virtualization project, or bringing the value to a virtualization project where we can present that technology. You don't have to use your entire budget. Now you have money for lower powered compute. You have more money for iPads or whatever software applications for the students that they can help learn and grow as the technology continues to move fast, right? We see solving problems at the software layer more so than the hardware layer. It's just that we can put these solutions together very efficiently. One of the things that we look at, and this kind of gets into this shared cloud concept, is we've been putting this in play. You saw that cycle chart. We've been putting this in play for the past 2.5 years. So we've caught the cycles at certain customers and have laid the foundation that we caught them at a desktop refresh. Well, now we have a virtualization initiative there that when that refresh cycle comes back around for desktops, you don't have to spend that money on the desktop refresh cycle. You can spend that money on getting devices that draw 12 watts of power to launch your virtual applications instead of your PCs that are drawing 120 watts of power. We have a customer that's, I think we're replacing 500 devices. We've been doing it the past couple of years with other customers. Thousands of devices we're replacing at probably half the cost of a traditional PC. And what we've also found is that with the BYOD initiative, you don't need all those PCs, right? You can start throwing that away. So that's an example of where we can catch in the right cycle with the right technology, can transition and save money as that cycle rolls around. And definitely by using a shared compute concept, it allows you to have a smaller footprint in your data center and rely on other areas for compute. I heard them talking about Office 365 or these cloud-based applications. Schools today are using the cloud. They may not know it, but they're using the cloud. With Google, Office 365, iStation, Renaissance, whatever. Applications are really moving off of your compute, and at the end of the day, your data center should be shrinking, thus saving power, savings, operational cost, and so forth. And one of the key areas that we're really focusing on the shared cloud is what we see as low-hanging fruit. A lot of school districts do not have a backup and replication framework. So one of the first initiatives we're going to be doing with TechServe is to solve this problem very efficiently at the software layer with small footprints at school districts that will definitely save money, but can also provide cost savings and a sense of recovery, if you will, right, if bad things happen, right? A lot of school districts don't even have that, or they rely on a Buffalo USB drive and things like that to back everything up. So these are definitely some of the key initiatives we have with the cloud, and it's going to continue to grow really from the advisory board and the technology and services that they want to use that cloud for. So where we're at, we talk a lot about breaking the cycle, right? I mean, some of the things that you see here is what Joe mentioned. I mean, we have on-demand storage. We solve the IOP problem. I don't know if you realize how many spindles it would take to get 100,000 IOPS, right? It's not going to be in a 2-use shelf. So with spinning drives, to get 100,000 IOPS, you're probably looking at a full 42U rack of a traditional storage unit to get that. We can do 100,000 IOPS all day long. It's a no-brainer for us. It's one of those things that's just like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. It works well. IOPS is not your problem. Let's focus on the solution. We talked about 10 gig to 10 terabit backplanes, right? It's available and it's very cost effective. On demand, instead of spending, you saw where the big blades and racks that you have to have that compute. it's hard for me today to go to in the data centers for these school districts, even the larger ones, and I see blade systems in there, and it blows me away. You don't need that, right? Compute is getting faster, it's getting smaller, and it's getting cheaper. Things that we can do in a one-use server is more than what you can do in half of a blade system these days, and it's here, and we've got customers lined up that we can show all day long. And one of the cool things too is the green effect. We have several devices that we can work with our school districts with. If you replace 5 or 10, you're not going to save a lot, but you start replacing these high-powered devices with these low 12-watt devices, and you do it in the hundreds, you're going to start saving money traditionally. We have one school district, they saved over, I think, an 8-month period, they saved about $80,000 in utility from comparison, and it was basically the same energy rate. So, you know, there's a lot of cool things that we can do, but it all really revolves around taking that technology, taking that next step, and believing in what we're doing is at a solution level to solve problems with software and applications, not by throwing big, expensive hardware, you know, into the mix. Because what we can do again as a top-of-rack switch is probably more compute than a lot of core switches have today, and you know, that's here. We're putting it in all day long, and it's pretty amazing. And this kind of goes into the green effect and somewhat of just this is one of our customers that really bought into what we've been doing. And they've been one of our customers for probably the inception of what we started doing with the HVE. And this is a really good statement in the sense that most school districts, their IT staff is not like a corporate world, right? The corporate world, you have 200 people, you have a vice president, you have a director, and you have 10 engineers. In a school district with 4,000 students, you have 4, including a director, a PC repair, an IT guy, and maybe a helper, right? And that's usually about what you see. So with our philosophy here, this is a statement from our customers, and it's basically saying, yeah, if we save the money on the infrastructure, we really can use that money more efficiently. You know, this customer, you know, just like most school districts, they have the savings where they can start rolling out iPads and iDevices and buying new software. A teacher says, hey, I need to get, I need iStation. I want 500 seats of iStation. I need Adobe CS6. It frees up the budget to do things like that, right? And really, if you look at the design, what we try to do is, again, we try to solve the problem with open interfaces, right? If you look at the trends at Microsoft and VMware and whoever else, software vendor X, everything is going to this open platform, open plugins, especially for cloud-based computing. So what we've tried to do, so I can go back here. No, not that one. Page up. There we go. So what we try to do is leverage, you know, the concept here is a hybrid concept. So we try to leverage as much as we can on the resources that you've had, and you spend a lot of money, the school districts have done, with your data center. But when it's time to refresh and it's time to move on and get new technology, we want to be there with what we can do with HVE and what we can do with Huawei and engineer these solutions in a shared cloud format. So pretty much that's kind of all I have here. I could talk on and on about technology, but we're not here to talk.
Thanks, Dave. Why don't you stay up here
Sure.
and we'll see if there's any questions for online. I think there's a few people online too that we might be able to relay. One other thing I wanted to say before we answered your question, Eddie, is it's no secret we're in a transitional period right now. We're transitioning from a traditional environment of sitting at a computer and doing the things that we've done for the last 20 years, or since I was one of the kids sitting and doing Mac programming back in junior high, and we're transitioning that. We've become more mobile. One of the slides that we saw from Jane earlier it's obvious. We're buying iPads. We're moving our books to iPads. We're doing a lot of these things on mobile devices that we just haven't done in the past. Sure, it's a learning process. A lot of us are going through learning. How many, what's the district that we work with? There are 14,000 iPads. We have a lot of these things going out in mass numbers, and we learn a lot. But Huawei, HPE, doing it properly, you can make a transition, and it's not nearly as painful as you think it might have to be, including things like Flash that won't run on an iPad for certain things. We've had to address those kind of problems. I see shaking heads because those are problems that you're going to run into. Do I choose other devices? Do I figure out ways to do it? How can I take that PC that I have and not spend $600 on it? I don't want to do that because we may be in a transition where I'm not going to need that in the future. So how can I extend it just a little bit further? Huawei can help with that. And that's what's fun working with these guys, is that they listen too. They really listen. And I just enjoy that when you can talk to a group of engineers and you can talk to the COO, and say, hey, this is what we need. Let's make this happen, and then they actually do. It's pretty cool. So Eddie asked, I don't know if I caught the whole thing.
I'm gonna conclude the
okay.
webinar, and then we'll do our Q&A.
Okay.
This is Frank Berry again, and on behalf of Huawei and HPE, I want to thank all of you that are online for attending the webinar. As follow-up to the webinar, I want to remind you to attend the August 14th event, the September 12th event. Again, they'll be on site today. You might want to think about it again, getting over to Plano for the next seminar. And I also want to mention that we'll be following up with communications to you, inviting you to work with us on some of the deliverables that we mentioned here. We'll also be asking you to participate in a survey that we're putting together. So we're hoping that by within a month or so, we'll be able to publish data from I'm hoping we get hundreds of ISC technologists to participate in this, but we'll be able to publish a report that shows trends in what's going on with ISD, what's going on with technology, and what's going on with their best practices. And the last thing I'd like to mention is the event that we're putting together for late September. So we want all the ISDs to unite, all the technologists to unite at the W, September 26th and 27th. It's a day-and-a-half event. We'll have educational gurus there. We'll have major vendors there. We're putting this all together. You'll be getting details on this as well. And on Thursday night, we're going to have some fun. So can't tell you about it yet, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So we hope you guys will sign up, and we'll send you details on that very shortly.
Who's putting that on? Is Huawei doing it, or is it your
Huawei's putting it on, but we expect HPE to be part of it, and like I said, we're working with other major vendors to get them on board right now. So I expect you'll see other vendors as well. And then the very last thing I'd like to mention is that this is if you feel like this, where within your building, this is what your coverage looks like, where maybe the principal's office is getting good coverage and the locker room out on the street, but where you need it most, you get a lot of complaints about your Wi-Fi coverage. This is the type of thing where Huawei and HPE can come on site. They can do an assessment of not only your Wi-Fi coverage, but take a look at your servers and see are they being utilized, so that when you do your refresh, you can buy less servers and host, and get better. Same goes for your storage. Maybe some of these new technologies, they can come out there, look at what you've got, and do an assessment on a lot of these on how you might move forward on several of these new technologies. So we'll be following up on that as well. And as far as your iPads, so Tom, if you don't know Tom Yarbrough is going to be delivering your iPads personally to each of you. So with that, we're going to conclude the webinar, and then we'll have the Q&A here. Thank you for attending, everybody out there.